Hey guys, welcome back. I was going to do this video last night, but got a bit late, and I must admit, after writing a match report and it being after midnight, I thought let me do it this morning rather. Just want to unpack the situation with the Bulls Northampton game a bit further. It's easy to sit around, and I've been looking at my Twitter the whole time, and lots of people having lots of opinions about it, but there's a couple of points that need to be made. First of all, the Bulls were never going to win that game. Sending the team that they did, huge mountain to climb, and never were going to do it anyway. So, I suppose there is validity in the fact that it's a Champions Cup quarter-final. You want your best team playing, but I also understand the Bulls' part, and I'll unpack that right now. Firstly, let's go into the team selection. There was a lot of noise last week before the game. A lot of it's understandable. I was at training on Tuesday. It was raining. Lots of Bulls players sitting on the sidelines, a lot of the guys who didn't fly with. There are genuine injuries, and the ones I know about are the ones I can talk about. Those are the ones to Marcel Coetzee, who's got a knee injury. Apparently he's out for a couple of months. Marco van Staden is also out for a couple of months. Stedman Gans was going for an op on Tuesday, so he's out for the rest of the season. Kanan Moody was hobbling around. Rowan Nokia had a hamstring and was also not training. So at least in a bunch of cases, there were genuine injuries. As to the rest, Bulls say they have medical advice saying that they couldn't take them with. I suppose you believe as much of that as you want. Point is, the team that they took was genuinely a second string team. Except for the likes of, I would say Sebastian de Klerk, who's been regular in the first squad and the best squad, and the likes of Mpilo Gumede and Cameron Honeycomb, who featured a lot for the Bulls this season. I think those three were definitely there, but there's a lot of players that were on the fringe who haven't played a lot, and that sort of came through in the game as well. So was it their best team? Could they have selected a better team? Probably, in a handful of cases. You were never going to get the 15 players that played at Loftus against Lyon. And there were certainly a couple of those that probably could have played. The situation goes further than that. I think we must realise that South African teams are only in their second year in the European Cup, the Investec Champions Cup, sorry. It's no longer a European competition alone. And first of all, let's dispel a couple of those scenarios. One, South Africa couldn't stay in Super Rugby. New Zealand Rugby made sure of that. Just go back and Google all the stories from back then. New Zealand CEO Mark Robinson made it quite clear that they wanted to go Super Rugby without South Africa, which left South Africa open, needing to find another competition. Of course, you can argue how good that's worked out for New Zealand Rugby, especially in the light of the whole thing going around Super Rugby is no longer what it was. They've lost the broadcast money from South Africa, and the fact that a lot of those games were in South African time zones, European time zones as well. So they've lost a lot of sort of glamour out of that competition. Well, certainly from here. And it's also, South African teams have been good for the URC. I think a lot of people would say that. Travelling concerns aside, and they've certainly brought something different to it. A South African winner in the first year, a South African finalist in the second year. It's certainly done well for the competition. Now, you could argue a lot of these points either way. The point is they are in Europe. South Africa is busy buying into both the URC and the EPCR, which means they've got another year to go. That also means that they can't host semi-finals in South Africa until they are full members. Now that's going to take a while. They're paying 300 odd million a year to buy into EPCR. So next year they'll be fully fledged shareholders of EPCR, and there'll be a lot more say in terms of the travel. Now come back to the travel. Let's go back to Jake's words on the travel. Obviously, he made a lot of noise. Now, there's a bit of a background to the travel story, which you should know as well. The Bulls wrote to Saru at the beginning of the year. They wrote again in the beginning of March to ask to do their own travel arrangements. The fact that we aren't fully fledged members of the EPCR makes that impossible. SA Rugby has to do all the flights for them at the moment. The Bulls have asked to do their own flights in the future, but that can only happen once South African Rugby is a fully fledged partner in EPCR. The irony of it all is that two things. One, Qatar Airways has a partnership with EPCR, but which doesn't benefit the South African teams, ironically. It only benefits the European teams coming to South Africa. So that's the first part of it. So it's a strange thing to do a partnership like that. I'm not sure why it's done, but that is the fact of the matter. So South African teams have to sort out their own travel through SA Rugby, and there's obviously logistical issues with that, especially when it's round the 16 game gets played on a Sunday afternoon, and you have to find 40 flights for players on a Sunday evening for a Tuesday flight. That's understandable. It's a tough call, that. The second one is, and we saw that in this weekend's game with the Sharks Edinburgh game, because there's no Qatar Airways flight to Durban. The EPCR chartered a plane for Edinburgh to get around to Durban, which is, I won't say it's probably what should have happened in the Bulls case, but unfortunately, that's the way the competition works. And so just another example of how uneven the playing fields are. SA Rugby must be commended. They got 22 of the Bulls players onto a overnight flight to London. That helped. That got the Bulls there a lot quicker, but you still wonder to yourself, would that have happened if there wasn't such a noise made? So I can understand Jake's point of view. I can understand SA Rugby's point of view. It is what it is at the moment. To say just don't play rugby in Europe is not going to make the problem better. To say they should have done it differently is not going to make the problem better. What needs to happen is a global season, first of all, scheduling that's better, and pools and a format that's better for everybody involved. And before you tell me, no, scheduling should be a lot better and the Bulls shouldn't be playing in Europe, etc. It's this is the way the future of rugby is going, unfortunately. If you against that, you're probably going to be against this World Club Cup that's coming through in 2 or 3 years' time, the Test Nations League that's going to start as well. These are all these things that are happening, and they're obviously happening to expand the sport and bring in commercial money from, and the equity partners want to make their share out of it. And that's understandable as well. That's the way of the world. But it is unfortunate at the moment. World Rugby have promised to get a global season ready for the last 15 years, and we've already seen the problems of that since South Africa's moved to Europe, especially in terms of the Rugby Championship from August to October, where the Springboks are busy there, and the Sharks have been the worst affected by that all their Springboks aren't available in that time period. So we've seen that happen. And then, of course, they tour in November, so that's almost 6 months of the year you can't use your Springboks. If the Six Nations and the Rugby Championship was aligned, it would be great. It would also mean that the players would get a proper break. We used to have this break in December, January. Now we don't have a break. Teams play over December and January now. And now the Currie Cup's in the off-season as well. So that means players have to be rested for 8 weeks a year. These are all things that are happening. As I say, it's very easy to say, well, just don't do it, etc. But professional rugby is a lifeblood. It's an industry. It feeds a lot of families. There's a lot of commercial value in everything. So you have to find a way of working with this. And that's what needs to happen. We need to have a scheduling. I think the EPCR competitions haven't worked in terms of the way they've done the pools this year. I think that's just, a lot of people would agree with that. The old pool format of playing everybody in your pool would probably be better, but how they accommodate that, I don't know. But it has to happen. It has to get better. So these are all the factors, where you've got to go around. And somebody like Jake, and not just Jake, Dobbo, John Plumtree, all these coaches have to juggle a 50-odd player squad between 3 main competitions, the Currie Cup, URC, and the EPCR competitions that they're involved in. And they have to do this over a 12-month period. In this, they have to still give Springboks an 8-week resting period, and they have to give Currie Cup players an 8-week resting period as well. So this juggling act becomes almost impossible. Plus, we've seen the cumulative effect of travel, and let's be honest, the travel's not easy for South African teams. And not for teams coming here from Europe either. We haven't seen, I think La Rochelle was the first team to win an EPCR game in South Africa. We've seen teams struggle when they come to Loftus and Cape Town and Durban. and Johannesburg. It's a tough place to play. La Rochelle this weekend probably were a bit off the mark thanks to their travel to Cape Town. Now that's just a reality. We can wish it away, but it's not going to go away. We need to find better ways of handling it. Anyway, these aren't excuses for the Bulls' performance. They knew that this was probably going to happen with the team they picked. They took that gamble, and it wasn't surprising to see them lose like they did. You could see a lot of players in that team hadn't played together for a while. You could see, especially in the midfield, a guy like Henry Immelman hadn't played for 6 months. Dravino Jacobs hadn't played for 6 months. You could just see there was just a general, while there was a lot of bravery against the top team in the Premiership, there was just a lack of cohesion around that team. And they got hammered for it. And that was the gamble they took, and they knew it could probably happen. So where does this all leave us? Well, EPCR are saying they're going to investigate the Bulls for breach of the competition rules, or that's off Alex Ado's Time article. They haven't really in the past, and if they do that, they open up a can of worms that teams like Lyon the previous week, who sent a weekend team to South Africa, probably need to be investigated as well. I suppose there's a lot of people that just are jumping on the bandwagon at the moment, looking for reasons to try and hammer South Africa. But if you go and punish the Bulls now, you, as I say, one, you open up a can of worms. Two, you make that entire problem worse. So rather try and fix the problem and get the scheduling right so that we can see the top teams play each other at the same time. I don't see this happening again. I'm hoping that it's a wake-up call to everybody involved, and I'm hoping that we really do get better scheduling in the future. Yesterday's game between Harlequins and Bordeaux was an absolute cracker. Leinster La Rochelle, just as big a cracker, although I suppose we thought it might be a bit closer. And hopefully we deserve better fixtures like that. From the Bulls side, I can understand their reasoning. I don't think they were in an easy position. You can think of it what you will. You don't have to agree with them. But I understand their reasoning for it. So let's hope we get better scheduling, and let's hope somebody wakes up and we get this sorted a lot better. Because at the moment, there's just too much rugby, too much travelling, and that travelling has a knock-on effect. And the fans eventually, you're thinking with more rugby you get better fixtures, but you get situations like this. So let's hope there's a resolution to this and we can sort it out. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Leave below in the comments. I'd really like to know. I'm sure it's an issue that everybody's got an opinion about. So let me know and we'll chat soon.